The hunt was over, and the tribe gathered to celebrate their bounty. At the center of the feast hung the ox-bear's massive pelt, displayed proudly as the centerpiece of their triumph. Vikir sat beside Ayen, both wearing ceremonial headdresses. She smiled, asking how it felt to be the hero of the hunt. He answered calmly that it didn't feel any different. Ayen laughed softly, saying the ox-bear was not only powerful and fierce, but also intelligent, making their victory worthy of any warrior's respect. That, she said, was why he had earned the title of hero for this feast. Then, raising her voice just enough for Ahun to hear, she declared that it was far better than slaying a cowardly boar that soils itself when it runs, her eyes drifting toward him. Ahun, standing nearby with an annoyed look, handed Vikir a wooden bowl filled with stew. He told him flatly, "This is your share, slave." Vikir looked down at the bowl and muttered that there was barely any meat in it. Ahun barked that if it were his decision, he'd have filled it with meat, then turned away in irritation. Ayen leaned closer, explaining that this was tradition. Those who contribute the most receive the least meat, but in return, they gain greater honor. Vikir thought to himself that honor did little to fill an empty stomach. Ayen then laughed, saying it was satisfying to see Ahun in such a foul mood. While the tribe feasted, Vikir reflected silently. Thanks to Beelzebub, he had gained a new ability from the ox-bear, tenacious existence, Murcielago. He could now increase his body weight to nearly 600 kilograms by holding his breath. Not only that, but his strength had fully recovered after Beelzebub absorbed the ox-bear's essence. Ayen interrupted his thoughts, catching his attention as she handed him another bowl containing a peculiar piece of meat. She explained that the shaman had wanted it, but she claimed it instead, saving it for the hero of the hunt. Vikir replied that he'd already received extra meat, a jar of blood, and the entrails. Ayen grew flustered, insisting that this was different, something he had to eat. She explained that eating particular parts of the beast was believed to strengthen a warrior's vitality in more ways than one. Vikir looked down at the bowl, assuming it was some kind of intestine. He wondered if she thought he had digestion problems. A group of barbarian women nearby began to boo Ayen, asking in irritation if she intended to benefit from what she'd just given him. Flustered, Ayen stammered and told them to be quiet. Vikir decided to eat it without another word. The texture was tough, difficult to chew, but he forced it down while Ayen watched intently, her face brightening with every bite. Then she told him, with satisfaction, that now he would be able to perform properly. Vikir paused, confused, thinking he had already performed well enough during the hunt. Later that night, Vikir and Ayen went to a large tree stump deep in the forest. They began placing chunks of meat from the feast on top of it. Vikir asked why they were leaving food here when the tribe already had a shortage. Ayen said it was an offering to Madame Eight Legs, so the tribe could continue living in the forest. As he thought back to the fight, Vikir realized how foolish it had been to strike at that creature. The spider wasn't just another beast. It was something feared, a force of nature whose very presence inspired terror throughout the forest. A god only in the sense that nothing dared to challenge it. The next day, Vikir made his way through the village and noticed a long line of barbarian women gathered outside the chief's hut. They stood chattering among themselves, excitement and anticipation clear in their voices. He wondered if it was some kind of ritual. It wasn't. The women were talking about him, about how Vikir would soon become a member of the tribe, which meant he would be allowed to choose a mate. They were here to offer themselves. Before he could make sense of it, Ayen appeared, carrying a freshly hunted deer across her shoulders. Her expression darkened as soon as she saw the crowd. She demanded to know what they were doing and how they dared to try taking what was hers, especially after she had gone through the trouble of making that special soup for him. She threw the deer to the ground with a heavy thud. The women retorted that she should at least share. Why should she keep him to herself? Ayan snapped that they could go catch their own husbands if they wanted one so badly. The women grumbled that they had tried and failed. Her eyes narrowed, her tone sharp as a blade. She asked if they wanted to find a husband in hell instead. That was enough. The women scattered in fear. Once they were gone, Ayen sighed and placed a hand on her head, muttering that she needed to claim Vikir before he fully recovered. She added that she had already managed to feed him the oxbear's thing, then froze as realization struck. Vikir was standing behind her. Ayen froze, her face paling as she asked how much he had heard. Vikir's silence said enough. He finally understood what she had fed him. Desperate to change the subject, Ayen quickly said that her mother had called a meeting with the elders. As the hero of the feast, he would be able to demand something from her. Still flustered, she began suggesting what he should ask for. Vikir's eyes widened at her suggestion. Inside the chief's tent, the elders had gathered in a circle beside the tribe's leader. Vikir entered quietly and bowed, saying he came as summoned. The chief, Aquila, smiled faintly and said she had heard he was the one who brought down the ox-bear. She thanked him for providing such fine meat for the tribe. Vikir replied respectfully that he had only done his part. Aquila commended his modesty but told him praise should be given when it was earned. She noted that he had recovered surprisingly fast from his injuries, her tone calm but curious. Vikir answered that it was thanks to the kindness of the tribe that he healed so quickly. He looked up at her. The night vixen of the north. She was the reason the empire feared a tribe of barely 300 barbarians. Her presence was as imposing as Hugo's, yet she carried herself with a gentler, warmer air. Aquila rose to her feet and told him that he must be rewarded for his success in the hunt. From this day forward he would no longer be a slave. He was now a member of the tribe, one of their own. A murmur rippled through the tent. The shaman looked displeased, and Vikir recalled Ayen's warning that some of the elders opposed him joining their ranks. Still, Aquila's decision stood firm. She told him he could ask for one wish as a new member of the tribe. He could claim any available tribeswoman as his mate, or, if he preferred, take a slave. Ayen subtly waved her hands, signalling something toward him. Her gestures were clear enough. She was telling him to choose what she had suggested earlier. Vikir closed his eyes for a moment, then said calmly that he had a request. When he opened them, his gaze met Aquila's. He asked if he might bathe in the spring of valor. Gasps echoed through the tent. Even Aquila's composure faltered for a moment, surprise flashing across her face. Meanwhile, Ayen smiled, pleased that he had followed her advice. Aquila studied him in silence. Then she asked whether he truly understood what he was asking of her. Murmurs rang throughout the tent as Vikir's request stirred immediate controversy. The shaman scowled and called him an insolent fool. How dare he make such a request? He turned to the chief, his voice echoing through the tent. Only the most honorable warriors were permitted to bathe in the spring of valor. She must not indulge this boy. His grandson, Ahun, added that Vikir had no right to demand such a thing. As the tent filled with arguments and raised voices, Aquila looked toward Vikir and asked if he even understood what the spring of valor was. Keeping his eyes steady, he answered that he did. The spring of valor was a sacred place within the burial grounds, where only the strongest Valak warriors were laid to rest. It was said that bathing in its waters could heal all manner of wounds. Ayen had told him that the spring took time to fill, and only those who had done great service to the tribe were allowed to use it. One elder demanded that they forbid him from entering the spring. Another argued that Vikir had already proven himself. Allowing him to bathe there could strengthen him further, benefiting the tribe as a whole. The tent fell into heated debate. Aquila remained silent, her expression thoughtful. She wanted to grant his request, but he had not yet done enough to demand it without question. Going against the majority of the elders now would only create unrest within the tribe. Then a deep gong rang out, silencing the tent. Vikir tensed, scanning the tent and asking if they were under attack, but Ayan rose with a smile, saying it meant they had guests. Aquila lifted a hand to calm the room. She announced that the discussion would continue later and dismissed the gathering. The tribe gathered as merchants arrived with goods to trade. Ayan told Vikir the merchants came often, bringing things they could not find in the forest. The tribe always looked forward to their arrival. Vikir noticed the flag the merchants carried, the bourgeois family, one of the 7 houses that ran a merchant guild. To get here, they would have to pass through Baskerville or Morgue territory, and those houses would never grant permission. These men were smuggling goods. One of the men at the front raised his voice, shouting in the Valak tongue that it was market day once again and calling for anyone who wanted to trade to step forward. Vikir watched as trades began. Common goods from the empire were exchanged for rare items from the forest. The merchants were taking advantage of the Valaks, who didn't understand the true value of what they were giving away. Then Ayen shouted for them to stop, saying the trade was unfair. She argued that her diamond was worth far more than a single ear of corn. Vikir thought at least someone had sense, until she demanded 2 ears instead. When the merchant agreed, she grinned, thinking she had made an excellent deal. The rest of the tribe was no better, trading away valuable items for vegetables and simple goods worth nothing in the empire. Then a young girl approached the merchant, asking to trade a beetle larva for a glass ball. Disgusted, the man slapped the larva from her hands and spoke in Imperial to his men, calling the barbarians stupid and saying the girl would fetch a good price as a slave. Vikir placed a hand on the girl's head and replied in fluent Imperial that the merchant's trades here were void. The merchant froze, shocked that someone had understood him. Ayan looked on, unsure what was happening. Vikir told the merchant he'd heard everything, and that he needed to reverse every unfair trade he had made that day. The merchant demanded to know what he meant. Vikir explained that the prices they charged here were completely different from those in the empire. The merchant leaned closer, realizing Vikir must be the only one who spoke their language. He told him the shaman had blessed their trade, and that a brat like him should stay out of such matters. Vikir listed the values without hesitation. The diamond they traded was worth at least 2 million gold. The ball, crafted from an ox bear's horn, was worth 1 million, and the medicinal ingredients they took, some, were priceless. The merchant stared at him, wondering how he knew all this. Vikir picked up the glass ball the girl had wanted and said it was supposed to help you sleep and bring good dreams. He explained it released a narcotic that slowly poisoned the body over time, which was why it was banned in the empire. Then he crushed the ball in his hand, glaring at the merchant. He told him how dare he bring such a thing here. One of the merchants asked nervously what was happening. Ayen stepped closer and repeated the imperial words she had caught, drug, harm, body, to make sure she'd heard right. Vikir confirmed she had. Anger crossed her face. She demanded if that was the reason some of their people had fallen ill recently. Realizing the situation was turning against them, the merchant tried to call it a misunderstanding and started backing away. Suddenly, an arrow struck his shoulder as Ayen fired. Ayen glared at them, calling the merchants fiends and shouting how dare they deceive her people. Panic spread among the merchants. Their leader shouted for everyone to run, abandoning their goods as they fled. Vikir asked Ayen why she was letting them go. The merchants wouldn't take their loss lightly and would surely retaliate. Ayen told him they weren't letting them go. The merchants would return to their camp, gather reinforcements, and the tribe would ambush them there. Night had fallen by the time the merchants returned to their camp. A band of hired mercenaries waited there as the merchants angrily recounted how the Valaks had stolen their goods and ordered them to prepare for battle. Not far from the camp, Ayen stood on a ridge overlooking the area with her eagle perched nearby. Vikir stood beside her in silence. She told him there was only one punishment for those fiends: extermination. Below, the merchants and mercenaries set out toward the Valak village, ready to reclaim their merchandise by force. One of the mercenaries smirked and told the merchant leader that they shouldn't bother dealing civilly with barbarians. They should all be killed or enslaved. The merchant warned him not to underestimate the Valak tribe or the forest itself. The mercenary scoffed, asking why they had been hired if he was so afraid of them. He struck a match, lighting a cigarette, saying they would take all the loot once the village was ransacked. The merchant hesitated, then told him to do as he pleased. The mercenary reassured him that the Valaks wouldn't stand a chance. He passed the match to another mercenary, who lit his own cigarette. A third asked to use it as well, but the man refused, saying the rule was never to share a match 3 times. It brought bad luck. The third man snatched it anyway, saying he didn't believe in superstition. The words had barely left his mouth when an arrow struck him square in the forehead. Before anyone could react, the man beside him fell with another arrow to the head. The leader who had been speaking to the merchant dropped next, an arrow buried deep between his eyes. The merchant froze for a heartbeat before shouting for the men to extinguish their lights. From the ridge, Ayen drew her bow and ordered her archers to fire. She told them to show these invaders what it meant to face the Valak tribe. A rain of arrows filled the night sky. Vikir watched nearby, impressed by their precision even from this distance. Another tribesman approached and set a barrel beside him, the one Vikir had asked for. Down below, the mercenaries scrambled for cover, hiding behind shields and shouting for their mages. But before they could recover, a barrel soared through the air, propelled by 2 arrows tethered to its sides. The arrows struck trees, leaving the barrel hanging above the mercenaries. More barrels followed, dangling overhead, dark liquid dripping from the cracks. A moment later, flaming arrows streaked across the sky. They struck the barrels, setting off a chain of fiery explosions that tore through the enemy line. The blast engulfed the front ranks, burning men and horses alike, leaving only a few survivors scrambling in the chaos. The leader of the merchants stumbled away from the inferno, coughing and burned, but alive, or so he thought. A figure emerged from the darkness behind him. The merchant turned and froze. It was the same Valak brat from earlier. Panicking, he stammered out a warning that they'd regret this if they killed him. He held up a parchment stamped with an imperial seal, declaring it to be a permit signed by the new deputy magistrate of Underdog. If they harmed him, the Baskervilles would come for them. Vikir stepped closer. He asked if the man meant the new deputy magistrate, Vikir. The merchant nodded quickly, saying yes, the infamous Vikir himself. Vikir's gaze hardened. He told the man he didn't recall giving such permission. The merchant's eyes widened in disbelief. He stared at Vikir's face, recognition dawning too late. Before he could speak another word, several arrows struck him, killing him instantly. Vikir lowered his bow. He told the corpse that the punishment for forging the seal of the Baskervilles was execution. Ayen rode up on her wolf, calling out to him and telling him to get on, calling him slave as always. Vikir replied that he wasn't a slave anymore as he climbed onto the wolf behind her. The remaining mercenaries tried to regroup as the rain of arrows suddenly ceased. The abrupt silence unsettled them. They looked around, wondering if the Valaks had fled. Then the ground began to tremble. Something vast moved in the darkness. The forest fell silent as the sky filled with enormous shadowy legs. Madame Eight Legs had been awakened. Ayen and Vikir rode off through the trees as fire and chaos erupted behind them. She told him his plan with the fire had been brilliant, that he was now a true Valak. Vikir glanced back at the monstrous silhouette looming behind him. No matter how many times he saw her, Madame Eight Legs was truly terrifying. Back at the village, the chief granted Vikir's request. She would allow him to bathe in the spring of valor. He had earned it. Catching an ox bear to ease their food shortage, protecting the village from invaders with his plan using oil barrels, and ensuring no Valak lives were lost. He had also uncovered the true cause of the sickness spreading through the tribe. There was now no denying his worthiness as a warrior. The chief turned to Ayen and told her to guide Vikir to the spring. Ayen grinned and slung an arm around his shoulders, asking if he didn't feel satisfied. Vikir looked at her, puzzled, and asked what she meant. She tilted her head toward the shaman. She told him to just look at his face. The man who'd claimed the illness was a curse. After what Vikir had done, his words no longer held any weight. Vikir's gaze lingered on the shaman. He recalled how the merchant had claimed to possess the shaman's blessing for his trades, and suspicion began to grow. Later that evening, Vikir bathed in the spring of valor. He could feel his mana stabilizing, his weakened bones and muscles slowly regaining their strength. It reminded him of the river Styx, though not nearly as potent. At least there was no age limit, he thought. He glanced over and asked Ayen why she was there with him. Wasn't he the only one granted permission to bathe? Ayen smiled, twisting a strand of her hair, and said he shouldn't be so petty. Who cared? She told him he should thank Adonai for finding the spring. Vikir asked who that was. She explained that Adonai was a legendary warrior of the Valak tribe, strong enough to face even Madame Eight Legs. She added that he should show proper respect now that he was a Valak himself. Vikir remarked that if Adonai truly fought the Madame, then he was worthy of respect, Valak or not. Ayen fell silent for a moment, thinking back to her mother's words. Aquila had told her that Vikir would make a fine husband, and that she should claim him before anyone else tried. She looked at him again, the thought lingering in her mind. Maybe now was the right time. The conversation soon drifted to the merchants. Ayen claimed she had known all along that they were being overcharged. Vikir chuckled and asked if she really had. She told him not to laugh. She knew diamonds were worth more than corn. He asked her how much more. Ayen hesitated, thinking for a moment, then said confidently that 1 diamond could buy 20 ears of corn. Vikir shook his head. When he told her the real value, her eyes widened in disbelief. "That many!" she exclaimed. She crossed her arms and insisted that it proved nothing. What would the Empire even do with a shiny rock for it to be worth so much, she demanded, calling him slave again. Vikir told her it didn't matter, but asked her to make up her mind. It was slave 1 minute, Vikir the next. He didn't like the uncertainty. Ayen paused, then stood up. She asked if he didn't like uncertainty, then said she'd make it clear. She cupped his chin gently and told him she didn't want to call him slave or Vikir. She wanted to call him. A sudden splash interrupted her as a group of children jumped into the spring. Startled, she turned and shouted, asking what they were doing there. Vikir wondered what she had been about to say. Ayen told the children to get out. The spring's power weakened when too many people used it. The children giggled and hid behind Vikir instead. Vikir smirked and told her she seemed the petty one now. Ayen's eye twitched in annoyance. Then Ahun appeared, leading more children into the water. He told Ayen that the chief had ordered the children affected by the harmful substance to bathe here to heal. Ayen clenched her jaw, cursing her mother under her breath, certain she had done this on purpose. Ahun approached Vikir and thanked him for helping his sister, who stood beside him smiling shyly. She thanked him as well. Then he looked down, apologizing for having misjudged him. Vikir simply replied, "Right." Ahun grew flustered, asking if that was all he had to say after a heartfelt apology. Vikir told him he was too easy to anger. Ayen watched the exchange with a smile, deciding she still had time to make him hers. Then she stood proudly and welcomed him to the Valak tribe,